The 1970s gave us disco balls, bell-bottoms, and wedding customs so quirky they make us blush today. Ready to revisit those cringe moments, like pastel suits, choreographed line dances, and cake toppers that went overboard? Let's step back into an era when love was in the air, and maybe too much polyester. The Technicolor tuxedos and bridesmaid gowns. In the 70s, bold colors weren't just encouraged, they were practically mandatory. Groomsmen often wore powder blue or mustard yellow tuxes, sometimes with frilly shirts and wide lapels. Bridesmaids matched in similarly loud hues, creating a veritable rainbow at the altar. Today, we might think, yikes, but back then, it was the epitome of style. Do you remember rifling through old photo albums, smiling or cringing at those pastel suits? Disco-filled receptions. Disco fever took wedding receptions by storm. Glittering disco balls hung from ceilings, dance floors flashed with colored lights, and everyone tried to execute the latest hustle moves, though with varying degrees of grace. The bride and groom's first dance might involve Staying Alive or I Will Survive. Hearing those songs now might bring a fond chuckle, and maybe a little secondhand embarrassment. Did you ever witness a father-daughter boogie to a Bee Gees track? Reception games that went too far. From the bride blindfolded, guess which face is your husband game to the slightly awkward kiss for a dollar tradition, some 70s receptions teetered on the edge of TMI. Guests often howled with laughter, while the newlyweds tried to maintain composure. Today's couples might skip the awkwardness, but these games once stole the show. Did you ever cringe from the sidelines hoping you wouldn't be called up next? Ruffled wedding cakes and fake flowers. Towering confections with ruffles, pillars, and plastic fountains were all the rage, sometimes looking more like a miniature theme park than a cake. Toppers featured bride and groom figurines in matching pastel outfits, or even disco poses. And let's not forget the bouquet of plastic or silk flowers, chosen for year-round beauty. Who else chuckles when seeing old wedding snapshots with that multi-tiered, slightly wobbly spectacle? By the way, if you're enjoying this throwback to 70s wedding trends, please hit the like button and subscribe. I'd love to share more nostalgic gems with you. Matchy-matchy family outfits. Some families took coordination to the extreme, with the bride's mother, the groom's mother, and even extended relatives wearing outfits that matched the wedding party palette. Photos ended up looking like a color-coordinated army. At the time, it was seen as unity and style, but now we might call it overkill. Do you recall flipping through photo books and trying to figure out where the mother of the bride ended and the bridesmaids began? Over-the-top balloon releases. Balloons were huge in the 70s. Grand balloon arches at the ceremony and big balloon releases at the reception seemed whimsical back then. However, watching hundreds of balloons float off might make modern guests gasp at the environmental impact. Yet, in the 70s, that was pure romance. Did you ever chase a stray balloon during a wedding, hoping it wouldn't pop? Loud, chaotic live bands. Wedding bands rocked 70s receptions with punchy brass sections and wailing guitars, even if the songs weren't exactly wedding appropriate. A little off-key, too loud, no problem. Guests were too busy dancing the night away to mind. Today we might cringe at the volume and questionable set lists. Who else remembers a band stumbling through a disco meets country mashup? Money pinning on the bride and groom. In some traditions, guests would pin cash onto the couple's clothing for a money dance or dollar dance. By the end, the newlyweds might look like walking money trees, covered in bills. While meant to help them start their married life, the scene of guests pinning money on a bride's gown could be awkward. Did you ever get poked with a pin while trying to hand over your cash? Car decorations gone wild. Back in the 70s, newlywed getaway cars were often lavishly decorated with shaving cream, silly string, tin cans, and "just married" signs that spanned the entire rear window. Sometimes, unsuspecting couples found confetti or rice poured right into the car seats. Today, A more subtle approach is typical, but the older, paint the whole car style remains a beloved, if slightly cringe, memory. Do you recall seeing a car so covered that you wondered how they'd see the road? Matching velvet suits for the whole groom's party. Not only did groomsmen sport pastel tuxes, but velvet was also a popular, if sweaty, option. Imagine a lineup of guys in velvety burgundy suits, ruffled shirts, and chunky ties, standing in the summer sun for photos. It might have been all the rage then, but we'd probably gasp today. Do you recall a wedding party wiping their brows under that thick fabric? Choreographed entrance dances. Long before viral wedding dances, some 70s couples had planned routines, complete with step-by-step disco moves and mirrored ball lighting. The wedding party would enter the reception, boogieing down the aisle in unison. Guests half laughed, half cringed, but it was definitely a moment no one forgot. Did you ever witness a groomsman lose his rhythm and send the crowd into hysterics? The bubble send-off. Bubbles might seem tame compared to balloon releases, but in the 70s they were done in the most flamboyant ways. Giant bubble-making machines, with questionable safety, sometimes drenched guests in soapy water. And there was always that one uncle blowing bubbles into someone's face, thinking it was hilarious. Did you ever watch a bride frantically dodge rogue bubbles landing on her hair? Unity sand, candles, and everything else. Ceremonies sometimes featured multiple unity rituals at once. A unity candle, unity sand, unity wine, even a unity handshake with all the parents. The result? A somewhat drawn-out process that left guests shifting in their seats. While a sweet sentiment, it occasionally dragged on, leaving everyone wondering if there'd be yet another symbolic act. Did you ever see so many unity traditions that you lost track? Personalized napkins and matchbooks. Galore. No 1970s wedding was complete without piles of personalized items. Napkins with the couple's names in swirling script, matchbooks printed with the wedding date, and maybe even coasters. Today, we might roll our eyes at the environmental impact, but back then, it was considered top-notch hospitality. Were you ever handed a monogrammed wedding matchbook that you tucked away for keepsakes? Backyard bonanza, with questionable decor. Not every 70s wedding was in a fancy hall. Some families opted for a backyard bash, complete with mismatched lawn chairs, plastic tablecloths, and leftover holiday decorations repurposed for festive flair. The results could be delightfully quaint, or borderline tacky. Did you ever help string up multicolored Christmas lights in June? Live birds and butterflies. Some couples sought an enchanted vibe, releasing doves, pigeons, or even butterflies during the ceremony or reception. The reality often involves startled birds flying into rafters, or bewildered butterflies fluttering nowhere fast. Today's animal welfare concerns would put a stop to that, but in the 70s it seemed oh so romantic. Did you ever see guests ducking while birds panicked overhead? The garter toss with a disco twist. Sure, tossing the garter is a long-standing tradition, but in the 70s, it often collided with the disco craze. Imagine a groom boogieing his way to the bride's chair, while Le Freak blared in the background, then dramatically flinging the garter across the dance floor. The crowd's cheers mixed with secondhand embarrassment. Did you ever witness a groom ham it up a bit too much? Personalized love potion cocktails. Some couples got creative, naming a signature drink after themselves, like Mike and Linda's Groovy Love Elixir. Bartenders might serve it in funky, neon-colored glasses, or in the ubiquitous 70s era mason jars, and the recipe sometimes included questionable combos. Guests would politely sip, possibly grimacing at the unusual flavors. Did you ever see an entire punch bowl vanish just because people wanted to be polite? The DIY flower child arch. Drawing on hippie influences, some 70s weddings featured arches decorated with paper flowers, macrame, or even beads. While it could look whimsical, A poorly constructed arch sometimes collapsed mid-ceremony, sending vines and faux blooms tumbling. If you remember Aunt Sally's wedding, arch swaying ominously in the breeze, you know the tension all too well. The fog machine first dance. Picture a swirling cloud of dry ice fog as the newlyweds slow dance to Love's Theme by Barry White. The concept was dreamy in theory, but in practice the fog could obscure everyone's view or leave the couple coughing if the machine malfunctioned. Still, it made for dramatic photos, until the vapor dissipated, revealing them blinking in the haze. Did you ever peek through a sea of white vapor, trying to catch a glimpse of the bride and groom? Family sing along. Some families took unity to new heights by performing a live song together. Parents, siblings, and even a tone-deaf uncle or two. They'd gather around a microphone during the reception, belting out a classic 70s ballad. While it aimed to be heartwarming, it often veered into off-key territory fast. Do you recall any wincing guests trying their best not to giggle? Slideshow spectacular. On film strips. Before digital slideshows, some couples created film strip love stories. An unsteady projector would whir through childhood photos, shaky wedding pics, and maybe some questionable honeymoon teasers. The bride and groom's commentary, if they offered it, could be both sweet and painfully awkward. Did you ever strain your eyes in a dimly lit venue, praying the reel wouldn't jam? Kids reciting love poems. Children in the extended family, sometimes forcibly volunteered, would stand up to recite sappy verses about eternal devotion, occasionally stumbling over big words like cherish or everlasting. Cute, sure, but it could border on uncomfortable if the kids looked miserable. Did you ever watch a 7-year-old struggle through Roses Are Red while glancing at mom for escape? The surprise. Honeymoon send-off. Friends or family secretly booked over-the-top honeymoon activities, like an impromptu disco cruise or a timeshare preview disguised as a mini vacation. Couples caught off guard would discover their romantic getaway was anything but. Today, we'd call that intrusive, but in the 70s, it was sometimes seen as a gift. Did you ever hear a newlywed pair grumble that they couldn't opt out? Live animal ring bearers. Puppies, kittens, or even parrots sometimes stood in for traditional ring bearers. While it sounded adorable in theory, the reality of a confused, squirming creature delivering jewelry could lead to comedic or chaotic moments. Who else remembers that hush settling over the crowd as everyone prayed Fido wouldn't bolt with the ring? The Who Wore It Best guest competition. In some circles, the bride's extended family or close friends would unintentionally challenge the spotlight by wearing equally flamboyant outfits, leading to whispers of, "She's upstaging the bride," whether it was a mother-in-law sporting a sequin gown or a cousin in a ball skirt with feathers. The resulting fashion clash could be hilarious or tense. Did you ever see a bride forced to grin through gritted teeth at a guest's over-the-top ensemble? Karaoke-style vows. Long before karaoke machines were common, some 70s couples insisted on singing their vows, often unaccompanied or backed by a basic tape recorder. The idea was to show raw emotion, but the outcome could be, well, raw indeed. Wincing guests politely applauded, trying not to laugh at off-key phrases about eternal devotion. Did you ever hear a groom belt out "I do" like a rock star? Collage-style guest books. Instead of a simple signature, couples encouraged guests to bring photos, clippings, or doodles to paste into a massive scrapbook, right there at the reception. Glue sticks, safety scissors, and maybe some questionable images, or cringe commentary, ended up plastered beside formal wedding shots. While creative, it could quickly become messy or accidentally R-rated. Did you flip through a decades-old collage and wonder what on earth Aunt Betty was thinking? The post-ceremony conga line. After sealing the deal, some newlyweds kicked off the reception with a conga line that snaked around the venue, coaxing unsuspecting guests to drop their cocktails and join in. The chain wound through the yard, the kitchen, sometimes even out the front door and back in again. While fun, it also guaranteed a few bumped elbows and "why are we doing this?" moments. Did you ever see a conga line break mid-dance, leaving a trail of giggling guests? The roast of the bride or groom. Occasionally, groomsmen or bridesmaids would hijack the microphone for a mini roast, sharing embarrassing anecdotes, like that time the groom forgot his pants on a school trip, or the bride tried to perm her hair at midnight. While comedic, lines were sometimes crossed, leaving guests squirming if the jokes got too personal. Any memory of crickets chirping after a best man's jab landed poorly? The 1970s wedding scene had it all: disco-mania, eye-popping fashion, and games that make us squirm just a bit now. But for all their quirks, those traditions shaped a vivid era, one brimming with color, laughter, and boundless creativity. What about you? Did you attend or star in a 70s wedding that still makes you shake your head or smile from ear to ear? Share your memories in the comments, and let's keep that funky, free-spirited spirit alive.